Melissa Kwan, welcome to the Buy, Grow, Sell podcast.
Thanks for having me, Simon.
My absolute pleasure. I'm very much looking forward to hearing about your story, and I know we're going to touch on the company Spacio, and I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. But hearing your journey about how you started and ultimately exited that business. Melissa, maybe just for our audience, maybe you could kick off and give us a little bit of your background and kind of what led to you starting that company.
Yeah, so Spacio was my second company. I'm on my third right now. But 12 years ago, my last job that I worked for someone was at SAP. And I remember like absolutely hating what I was doing. I was working for small companies before that, and that was like my big company experience. And I was just a horrible, horrible employee. And then I came out of that wanting to have my own business, whatever that meant at the time. Like my parents are not entrepreneurs, so I thought I should start a business because it's easy, right? Like you don't have, no one was there to like tell me it was hard. So that was kind of the beginning of my entrepreneur journey. I started, a real estate tech company wanting for it to be a product company. Eventually that first company turned into an agency model where, if anyone has had an agency before, you'll know it's a very, very difficult business. After a few years running that, I decided that we should build a product that everyone should pay for versus doing individual apps that, we were selling to like individual companies. So that was actually the beginning of Spacio. It kind of morphed from the first company into the second. So even though Spacio was, I would say I think it's like a 5-year-old company, it felt like a decade long because of how the first company kind of morphed into the second. And just for context, Spacio is was and is it's still live right now. It's the number one open house check-in app in real estate.
Yeah, awesome. And I want to come back and explore what that means. But first of all, I have to chuckle when you talked about the big corporate experience and then starting a business because it's easy, because I had similar things. It's I think everybody in our team at Exit Advisory, we all call ourselves corporate escapees because we all, I don't know, sometimes you got to go and do something for a while to realize what you don't want for the rest of your life. And and starting businesses sounds easy until you do it. And so look, I think that's it's a message and a story I think a lot of entrepreneurs can relate to. So thanks for sharing that. So back to Spacio for a second. So when you say, it's about check-ins, and can you just explain it a little bit more to people who might not kind of get this space?
Yeah. So I guess in Australia they would call it open homes, but in North America it's open houses where instead of making an appointment with a real estate agent to view a property, it would almost be like a carnival, right on like Saturday, Sunday, especially in New York where I was living at the time that I was doing this. And it's like a low commitment way of going into a property that you're interested in and just kind of poking around. And, but for the real estate agent, it's a huge lead gen opportunity. So anybody that comes in could be a buyer or seller. So that's why they require you to sign in on a piece of paper, like your name, email, phone number, whatever that might be. And we were the iPad, like digital version of that check-in. It's really no different than like some of the fancier office buildings that you walk into and they make you sign in. But if it's a pen, you kind of draw a line and you run away. But if it's an iPad, it forces you to type in the accurate information. So on the front end, that's what it was. But actually on the back end, because we sold to companies and companies would give it to their real estate agents as a perk to joining that company. There was a lot of like automatic follow-up data, like foot traffic that we would feed to the company. There were a lot of like mortgage partnerships and things like that. So a lot of stuff happened on the back end, but on the front end, it was just a super simple like buyer seller check-in when you walk into a property.
Yeah, nice. So solving quite a simple but obvious problem, and then I love this whole capturing of the data and what you can do with it. Talk to me a little bit about the journey. I mean, when you started, did you start on your own? Did you have any business partners? What did that kind of all look like?
Yeah, so I had a business partner, a co-founder who was my CTO. I was working with him on the first business as well. And we basically how do I say this? We started the company. I hired him actually just out of university. So none of us really had any experience, and we kind of just, stumbled into this thing, and really honestly thinking it was easy. And then and the way that I started the second company was, I had a friend that once told me, you need to get a loan or raise money when you can, because when you actually need it, then no one's going to give it to you. So you need to do it when you don't need it. So what I did to start that second company was I took all the revenue that we had from our agency. I took a loan against that, like an equal loan against that. I pulled everything out, and then I put it into incorporated a second company, put that in. And that was like my startup capital. And that was kind of the beginning of that.
Yeah, that's really curious. I think that's a smart lineup. It's funny when you need money. Yeah, I kind of get that analogy. Somebody once said to me about startups, as you're running around looking for capital, if you go and you ask people for money, you often get advice. If you go and ask them for advice, they often want to give you money. And so, yeah, it's kind of funny, the psychology of all this sort of stuff. So yeah. So cool. Okay. So you launched into this thing. I get the whole ignorance is bliss kind of thing, right? Because I think I've done a few things in my life where I've gone, man, if I knew how hard that would be, I might not have started, but I'm glad I actually did it and got through it. So, maybe sometimes having the blinkers on is probably a good thing for productivity and innovation. But talk to me about that journey as you started, you're building a piece of tech. I don't know how to build tech. I'm not a tech guy. For those thinking about this sort of stuff, I mean, what does that typical kind of journey look like before you start getting customers and revenue and all that sort of good stuff?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And it's a really big and heavy one, because I think when I started that business, I was probably in the worst part of my career. Like, I was in the worst financial position because we were never venture funded. Like, we are not a venture backed company, and my third company is still not. So that puts you in a very different place. You don't have unlimited funds to do anything. In fact, you don't have any money to do anything. And the most expensive part to starting a tech company is really the tech salaries. And we were in Canada, so our burn is already much lower. And also my co-founder is my CTO. So while he needed a salary, it wasn't like market salaries. I didn't pay myself for many years. So it was, I would say, from the day we incorporated Spacio, and don't forget, I had another company before that. So it wasn't like I was drowning in deals. It was still very difficult. From the moment of incorporation to finding a product that someone would pay for, the first time someone put in their credit card was 3 years.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably a little bit longer than I guess the average. There really isn't an average, but I just didn't have any experience because I was I had an agency before. Somebody would come to me and say, I want X. And I would give it to them and they would pay me, right? Whereas if you're starting a SaaS product, which is what Spacio is, it's a product that people subscribe to, then it really takes an immense amount of understanding of the problem that you're trying to solve. And also, don't forget, customer expectations are at an all-time high. And I'm talking 5 years ago now, or 7 years ago now. So It is only going higher. Just think about the last time you downloaded an app or you looked at a piece of software. How many seconds did it give you? Did you give it before you gave up on it because it just wasn't good enough, or didn't have that feature, or that feature didn't do everything that you wanted because you already have this fabricated reality of what this thing should do for you? And that journey was actually really difficult. So that I had all this money that I thought would last me 2 years. It didn't, because it never does. I think it lasted 9 months or something. So for a good year and a half of those 3 years, I was going to startup events for food. I would have one meal a day and time it so that I don't get hungry at night. It was just, and I would try to find side deals. So I can maybe make next month's payroll and, find tax breaks or government grants that I could patch another hole. Like that went on for a really, really long time. And then the first time someone put in their credit card and paid $10, I couldn't even believe it. I thought like we were just testing the software because we had an idea of what we wanted to build. Like we had an idea of like, we want to build, an open house software, but what is that, right? Like what process in that open house journey are we digitizing? And so, what the mistake that I made was I made the product too big. Like I think, people think I have to innovate, right? I have to really innovate to make someone buy something and make them like, I have to give them a shiny object, but there is nothing more untrue than that because people's imagination is, like their imagination is not, how do you say that? Like, it's not very big. Is that the right word?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
I know what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah. They can't make a mental leap like between like this and that. So originally we had this like super bloated, like open house solution that had software and hardware and all these moving parts. And it was actually one day I was like trying to pitch to a VC because we had no money. I didn't even want VC money. I just like needed money from anywhere. And I was talking to this VC from my co-working space and he was like, yeah, this looks like it could be something, but there's too many moving parts. You should do the one part that everyone does, which is like signing in. Like all this other stuff, like no one has to do, but everyone has to sign in. And at that point, like I just didn't even really have another choice. We had like 3 months of runway. So what we did was we shed all the features except for the sign-in sheet. And that was the thing that someone paid $10 for, like 3 years later. So that was really the journey. And then from that $10 to acquisition was like less than 2 years.
Wow. Can I come back to this beginning part because you've poured your money in, you've borrowed money. The weight of those kind of scenarios can be pretty heavy. You mentioned before that you sort of have this idea that you sort of the unknown around some of that can probably add to anxiety. I imagine. I'm just wondering, through these 3 years, did you ever have any of those moments where you go, "Holy moly, am I doing the right thing here?" or have those doubts?
Yeah, I mean, like a few times a day. I'm not even exaggerating. Because everything is against you. Like everything. Yeah. Like you have no money. Your family thinks you're useless because you have no money ever. Because success, like they see success, like the world sees success tied as like a monetary value, but you never have it. So you must suck in what you do. And of course, like I don't come from a family of entrepreneurs, so they didn't really understand. So then you don't have encouragement from that. And none of your friends are doing this. Like they just went and got jobs and like they're really happy and living in their first house and they're even upgrading. Whereas like you can't even make rent and you're going to start events for food. Right. So like every day you're like, why am I doing this? Like I should just go and do something else. Or am I doing the right thing? Or, if I'm doing the right thing, then why won't someone pay for this? If there's a market, then why is it so hard? And you have people telling you all the time, like, this shouldn't be so hard. And you start to believe them because you're just suffering all the time. So like, I think a lot of people can relate to that as well.
I can relate to it. I helped a mate with a startup and it's, the amount of times that people don't actually understand, A, even what you're doing, B, what your journey's like, C, what kind of challenges you need to overcome to get to that next stage. And I actually found at times people sort of ask you how you're going and it was almost like you could hear the pity in their voice. Like, you know what I mean? And that always people try to offer advice and it'd be like, you actually don't even know anything about this industry or what I'm doing. And yet you somehow rethink that you're in a position to give me advice. Like
it's like every VC though, like literally every VC in the world never run a business. And they're like, you should do this. It's like, no, like you have no idea actually.
Oh man, I hear it. And it's funny, actually we talk a bit about that in our main business exit advisory is that how do you go and give business owners advice if you've never been a business owner? Like I
Yeah.
honestly think if you haven't had a few sleepless nights wondering if you're going to lose it all, you probably haven't been in business. Like don't get me wrong, I know that there's been, and I've had a couple of people on this show that have been cash flow positive from day one, and I clap my hands and celebrate and, well done, because you're the rare one, right? You're the one
Yeah.
percenter, because everybody
Yeah.
else has had sleepless nights,
Yeah.
So,
I want to grow up and be like that person.
yeah, totally. I think that we have to grow up at some point, and I'm not sure I really want to do that either. So,
Yeah, but if I did, yeah, if I were to,
Yeah.
then I want to be the person who's capital positive on day one.
Totally. So okay, so 3 years to kind of start doing revenue, 2 years to acquisition, so a 5-year journey, which, hey, is still pretty darn quick when you kind of look back in hindsight, and maybe when we gloss over some of the pain and suffering. Um, what did you have other employees? What did the team look like, and how did that grow over this period?
Yeah, so we always had a super small team. By design, because I realize I really, really hate managing people. Like that is really my least favorite thing to do. Like I love creating, I love selling, I love like the glory of putting something out there, but I absolutely hate people management. But also we just didn't have a lot of money. So, and even when we did, I was so afraid of losing that. Like just when you're in the headspace of always struggling and always suffering and always living in lack, like I still have that. Like I still go to a restaurant and look at the price first before looking at the item. Like I still make decisions at a restaurant based on price when I don't actually have to. It's just so programmed, and I was so afraid to spend the money when we had it. Yeah, so we outsourced a little bit, whatever we could, when we didn't require full time. Like I actually don't really, I mean, and right now, like our full team is outsourced. I don't believe in tying people in because they're employees. Like we've always had a remote team. Like I've been a digital nomad actually for 4 years, and I believe in like expertise and specializing. So we always found people to outsource to for really specific tasks. We had a team of, at any given point, maybe like 4 to 6 developers, depending on like where we were at and like whether they would stay or go. But we just ran a super tight ship, mainly because we had to, but also because I wanted to. So that was actually why we were able to get to profitability within like I think it was like under 12 months. Yeah. So right. Like from that $10 credit card, like we were able to like finally get to profitability. And then, and we just kind of grew from there, but we didn't, because like in a product, like at least the product that we were building was not a huge product. So it wasn't like, okay, the more we grew, we had to hire more people. Like, in fact, like the more we grew, the more stable the product got. And actually the less we had to build. So it kind of scaled nicely that way.
Was there any concerns for you, like when you're outsourcing, and once again, just going to put my hand up here, and this is me and my ignorance, but you're developing software. I get that you've got a CTO who must understand tech and coding and all this sort of stuff. But if you're outsourcing that, is there ever any concern that those people aren't in the tent, or they're not? I don't know if they were full-time working on your project or whether they had other clients, but like, is there ever any concern about protecting your IP and all that stuff on this journey?
Not so much, right? Because everybody that comes in signs a contractor agreement, and then you've got your confidentiality, you've got your IPs and all that stuff there. And also like in my previous company, I didn't even outsource as much as I do now. Like right now we have a team of 15 and like everybody is outsourced, and we hire developers through a company. So it's not like an individual person. I have heard some horror stories about like, not even just outsourcing, maybe having a co-founder who decided they didn't want to do this anymore. And it was a tech co-founder and they took all the code, or like they, gave it to someone else. Like I've heard those stories.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And it is difficult, but that's why your number one tech person has to be your co-founder or yourself.
Yeah.
And
yes.
that has to be
helps.
the person that knows how to protect that and, put the right protections around that. But also knows how to hire the right people who hopefully will respect this person enough to not do that. And also, like, if you go through a company, then, companies have these kind of reputations to upkeep. So it's very, very unlikely that will happen.
Yeah, interesting. So you're using a specific outsourced company that obviously focuses on tech and stuff like that. Where are they based, if you don't mind me asking?
Yeah, so we work with two companies. One is in Vietnam, and the other is in Belarus. For different purposes. And then my CTO is my co-founder, who's also my life partner. Kind of unusual, cool. But right now, like my previous two businesses, I was with a different co-founder, but for this one. But for this one, I consciously, like, if it's one of those things, like I get asked this a lot, like, what did you learn from your previous company that you would bring to your new one, right? Like, not only did I learn that I hate people management, I also learned that, like, I hate having employees. I hate hiring. Yep. I hate firing. So I came into this thinking I'm going to outsource every single person, like including, my CTO is a contractor, but also having that mindset allows you to like hire talent anywhere in the world. Like, we are not limited by that, especially in this day and age where, like, you just have to be so competitive. We can't even hire locally if we wanted to. Like, we do hire some people locally, but they've taken like 50% pay cuts to work for us because they believe in the vision. And those people don't really come along very often. Yeah,
I get that. Okay, so that's interesting. So you've got 3 years, you get to this product to a point where you're starting to make, you attract customers and revenue, and about 12 months to get to profitability. Can I ask, like, how big did it grow? Can you share with us, what sort of revenue you were doing by the time you sold? I don't know if that's confidential or not, but trying to get a sense of how big it was when you exited.
So I can't share the exact number, but it was like it was definitely 7 figures. Cool. But it was like the low 7 figures.
Sure. And where on this journey? Oh, well, actually, let me take it back one step. Like, when you started the company, did you think that you were starting this business to sell it, or was there not was the end game or exit kind of a bit more gray at that point?
It was really gray, I guess, like, because it all goes back to, like, having no experience, right? Like, I just wanted to start something that was mine, and I wanted to make a living out of it. Like, I was also living in Vancouver at the time, so I was not surrounded by this community of, like, tech people that would talk about exits or talk about raising capital. Like, all that was really new. It wasn't like, it was like a couple of years into that I moved to New York, and then started, like, and then all this, like, all these communities started springing up, right? All these accelerators and YC, like, all of that was, like, pretty new. And then I realized, people actually start these things to, like, sell them. And so it definitely wasn't until, like, I moved to New York and got more entrenched into those communities and those conversations that I realized, like, actually, like, people only build companies to sell. So I mean, at the beginning, it was just like I wanted to, like, pay myself a salary.
Yeah. So what point on this sort of 5-year journey did you and your partner start having the conversation about selling the business or thinking about selling?
Well, I never really talked to him about it. He was just not customer facing. He was not the business guy. Like, he was the product guy. Like, he was that side of the business. And that's important, right? When you find a co-founder, that you have very different lanes and you don't cross into each other's lanes. And we had a lot of trust in that. Like, I never, like, of course I have, like, product direction decisions and things like that, but I do not ask him how to, like, to do his job a certain way. And I don't inquire, and neither does he. Right. And we just kind of did our separate things. But I started to think about this when I just wasn't having fun anymore. And that's it, right? Like, and a lot of people are like, oh yeah, like, I want to sell it because, it's the right time to sell, or if it's, or I think it's a better fit into another company. No, like, I just hated what I was doing. It was really as simple as that. And I didn't shop the company. Like, it would have been a very different journey, I think, if I did. But I was talking to a friend who was like a friend and mentor in the real estate tech community who I would catch up with like once a quarter. And I was just actually complaining to him about how much I hated doing this. And I was just saying, like, I wonder if my co-founder will let me sell my piece so I can move on. And he was like, "Oh, like if you're thinking about that, then we're thinking about making our first acquisition, but you're gonna have to stay." So that was how it all started. I never even really thought about shopping it like with a banker, which a lot of people do. But as companies started to hear about like that, that this, I was having conversations with some anonymous company, then they also wanted to kind of to be a part of that conversation.
Yeah, that's interesting. And so how many would you say serious prospects did you have through that process?
Just one other one. Like
Yep.
we actually traveled to the office and like met the team and like did a presentation and submitted our financials and stuff like that. Like just, I mean, I think when you want to sell a company and you like broadcast that, everybody in your space will be like, "Oh yeah, I'm interested." Because what does that mean, right? That means I get to see your financials and I get to see all of your customers. And so you have to be very careful about that. And ideally, a banker will help you, filter some of that. But I don't know, like, do they really? Because they're motivated for you to sell the company as well. So so I didn't broadcast it also because it was the journey to get to where we were was so hard that I cannot imagine selling my company and working for someone I don't like.
Yeah.
It was more important for me to keep my lifestyle because I was at that point like already digital, like nomading, like living anywhere in the world. Like people don't like that, right? A lot of like, especially bigger companies, like they don't really like the idea of their like a team member, especially the CEO that they're acquiring, like on vacation all the time. Right? Like that's their thought. Like, "Oh, you're traveling, you must be on vacation." Like people don't understand that you can actually live anywhere, but also be disciplined enough to work. And there was no amount of money anyone could pay me to give that up because I earned it at that point. So the friend that I was talking to, the cool part about that was I knew him, he knew me, he knew my challenges, like just with life in general. After having been in this thing for 10 years, he knew my challenges with my co-founder. And he saw how hard I had to work to get to that point. And he was also a guy that like just had a lot of integrity. Like he was not going to go and try to get the lowest price. Like that just is not who he is. He was a very like he was just a very good guy. And I knew he would do right by me and my team. And he was like one of the very few people I could imagine working for. So that was actually the driver of like not going out there to shop the company.
Yeah, just the fit felt right.
Yeah, it felt right. And also like I think what people don't realize when they have to shop a company is like you have to be really enthusiastic about what you're doing. Like I wasn't. So if I wanted to package this, I would have to be the CEO that I wasn't. Like I'd have to pitch this like I'm so excited to like be a part of this thing and 10x this, right? Once I become a part of you. Right. But then with Aaron, who eventually bought my company, I could continue to be, my like pouty self. and he would know that I would still perform and still show up. And he would be okay with that because that's just who I am. And we were friends. So I didn't want to put on this like dog and pony show that I didn't believe in and then have to live up to that expectation.
Yeah. I respect that. Absolutely. As you start to talk valuations and all this sort of stuff, and I don't want to venture into anything that's confidential here, but give you some context. So a lot of the traditional businesses, as you would know, a lot of different ways to value businesses, but a lot of the traditional businesses we sell typically sell on a multiple of EBITDA. we're selling 3 SaaS companies at the moment, and all of them are being discussed at a multiple of revenue, which the first time I ever heard all this stuff and started looking into SaaS companies selling like that, I was blown away because how the hell do people get a return on this thing, right? So it's fascinating to me that people pay these huge multiples of revenue. In fact, one of my last guests got 60 times top line. I just couldn't believe it. Did you have in your mind a methodology that you were using to value your company?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, if you're working on selling 3 SaaS companies, you should sell it like very quickly because the market's changing.
It is.
Yeah, I mean, that honestly, that's like a great question because that was part of the driving decision behind like just not wanting to work on what I was working on anymore. Because like people think like real estate tech and they think, oh, it's a big business. Like as an economy, real estate's really big, but as a business in tech, it's tiny. And so there are like, I guess, average multiples, and it's always a multiple of revenue because that's just how tech companies and SaaS companies are valued. But in real estate tech, it's significantly lower than like general SaaS because
Yeah,
they're
right.
just the market just isn't that big because real estate is localized to a country. Like my software could not work in Australia, even though there are open homes. It's just the process of how you sell real estate and market real estate and how you pay agents and how brokers like recruit their agents, they're all different. So a lot of tech companies in real estate is just localized. So the market is very tiny and even like there's only like a Zillow and then Zillow bought Trulia. And now there's one Zillow. So like there's no more Zillows. So in real estate, it was like there was an equation. It was like if you're doing poorly, you're, 1 to 3 times the revenue.
Yep.
If you're average, it's 3 to 6 times. If you're
Right.
like knocking out of the ballpark, it's 6 plus, but there's like 3 companies maybe that actually
Yeah.
get there. And you'd have to own so much of the market and be in like consumer, like real estate consumer tech or like selling directly to agents. And most real estate companies are enterprise software companies. They don't sell direct to agents. So I kind of had an idea of like where we would fall.
Yeah. Cool. By the way, when you say average company sort of there, that 3 to 6, I reckon there's a whole bunch of people who are going to hear this and fall off their chair who've got traditional businesses going, I would take 3 times my revenue.
Yeah, definitely. If you can start a SaaS business, but I can tell you now, like it's and like I'm starting a SaaS company right now. Like it is so hard. Like everything, again, the forces are against you. And like my previous company, Spacio, was an enterprise SaaS, right? And the difference between like maybe selling a Salesforce to MailChimp, right? Everyone knows MailChimp. You go to the website, you sign up, you pay $10, or maybe there's a free thing, like great, right? Or there's a Salesforce where like every deal is like 100 grand, 200 grand. So my previous company was like Salesforce. I mean, the deals were much smaller, but you can imagine why it only took us a year to break even because it's like there's a piece of it that's customized, but the software, like the core of it is the same. So there's a piece of it that is service. So when every deal is like 10,000 to 50,000, then once you find what people are going to pay for, you just piece it together and then that's your profitability. What I'm building right now is more of a self-serve SaaS, which is like a MailChimp. So you can imagine how difficult it is to get like 1,000 people to pay you $20. It's significantly harder to get 20 people to pay you $1,000.
Yeah.
And that's why SaaS companies are worth so much because a lot of people die before they even get see any profitability, or they can't raise any money, or they have to be forced to sell because they just can't sustain their team.
Yeah. I want to come back to what you're working on at the moment because I think I'd love to hear more about it. Just to sort of close out Spacio, I typically find most deals get paid out in 3 kind of buckets. There's cash up front, there's maybe a deferred component, and then there's sometimes an earnout. I'm just curious, without going into, once again, private details, but Did you have an earnout? Did you have to hang around for a while? What did transition look like after you did the deal?
Yeah, so it's very common for at least the stakeholders to have an earnout period. I would be very, very surprised if there isn't and you're selling your company. Either you're doing super well or you're doing super poorly, like they want you out.
Yeah. Yeah.
But you're there because of the transition period, right? You're there because you want, like the new company wants you to make sure the customers stay and that they feel like comfortable with, the product potentially changing and like changing hands and changing management and changing support teams. So, yeah, definitely we were in all three buckets. Like we agreed on evaluation. And we had one part of it was upfront cash, and a lot of it actually went to pay out our existing investors. So we didn't have any VC funding, but we did have like family and friends. And then we had like a couple like angel investors that came on along the way. But like most of that actually went to pay out everyone to cross them off the cap table. It was the right thing to do. I think like we could have been like, so to give you an example, like some people will say, okay, 50% stock, 50% cash. Some people will say, okay, well, I'll do that for my investors as well. Like you get 50% and then you have to stay on. But what's the point? They've been with you for so many years. My uncle was there as well. He's kind of getting frustrated. So you want to, and you kind of want to pay him back and do that favor. But also like the new company doesn't want more people on their cap table that they don't know, especially. So we did the right thing. We basically took it. We paid out all our investors. We also paid out like some stock options and things like that. We had a little bit left for ourselves, which was amazing because I had lived almost a decade with like nothing. I didn't even have a credit card anymore. I didn't have a credit card for like 3 years because it was just like so maxed out. My credit was so bad. Like, and even after my exit, I needed to get like a secured credit card for like a year before I could like up my limit. Like that's just how ridiculous it was. But yeah, we had like a 2-year earnout period. And then a portion of that was based on revenue. So that like they would encourage you to grow the revenue and grow the upsell. Unfortunately, COVID happened and then open houses became illegal. Like they were not allowed. So that was my last earnout year, which really sucked. But to my surprise, the revenue, like our company still grew. That's how solid SaaS businesses are. It's because a lot of times it's an inconvenience to get off your software.
Yeah.
So they just might as well stay on it. And so it still grew, but it didn't hit, like we didn't hit the targets, of course. And then there was a part that was like stock that would be transferred into the new company, which if it's a public company, that's great. You can cash out, but our company was private. However, this company bought us because they had a plan to also exit themselves. Like they wanted us to be part of a story, and they were just kind of, they wanted us to fill in a gap that like they didn't have in the technology so that they could go and pitch that story. And actually this company was acquired last year.
Yeah, right.
So
cool.
I actually had, I guess, my real exit last year, and luckily it happened so quickly. But we kind of knew where that was going.
Yeah, nice. And yeah, you I guess we're all looking for that sort of life-changing moment, I guess, where all the hard work pays off. So it's so I suspect here, right, I might be jumping to conclusions here, joining dots maybe, but you've obviously had a good enough journey on this side of things that you're actually willing to go and do it again. So,
yeah, that's one assumption. It's not the right assumption. Yeah, but it's a assumption actually. Well, the reality is, we did not exit it for like retirement level money, right? Sure. We exited for certainly life-changing money. Like it allowed me to do a lot of things that like an adult my age like should be doing. Right? Like you just imagine like all your friends in the past 10 years are like upgrading their lives and like becoming surgeons from their, residencies and like building their assets with their partners, and you're just like scraping by. So yeah like life-changing in the sense that I could finally do some normal things. Right? like buy a house. But it could have turned the other way. So I'm certainly, like I joke about it, but I'm certainly very grateful that it did happen. But like And I also knew, and this was like in 2019, I knew that whatever I did would take another 5 years.
Yeah.
Like maybe you're smarter about things, but like, business, like there are really no shortcuts, especially when it comes to technology. Like there are so many hours in a day, so you can only build as fast as time allows you. And there's a process. It requires customer feedback, right? Like, and it requires iteration and it requires growing. So I knew that whatever I would do would just take that long. So actually, after the company was acquired, I had a conversation with my CEO and got him to sign off on me working on something else that is unrelated to, real estate or what we're doing and not competitive. And he knew that if he didn't sign off, he would have a really bad time with me. I just needed it for my well-being as well. So that was when I just sprung into the new company like 2 months after. Not because it was like such a great experience. I love it in building companies. Like I hate the people that are like, oh, I'm bored when I retire. I'm like, no, I will be having so much fun. Like I will not run out of things to do. I will love my life. But yeah, like I did it because I don't want to work for a very long time. And I knew I needed to.
So okay. So first question is what is your new company? Because let's share that with everybody. So
yeah, my new company is called eWebinar. And eWebinar is an automated webinar solution. So what we do is we save people from doing the same boring, repetitive webinar over and over again by taking like your perfect video and delivering it like a webinar. So people can join like your demo, your onboarding, your training, like hundreds or maybe even thousands of times a month without you ever needing to be in front of a camera to actually do the webinar.
Yeah, awesome. That sounds like and very appropriate for the time. So, if you're listening to this, go and check it out online. My question, Melissa, is in starting this new company, having had the experience that you had, did you start now with a very different approach? Are you building to exit? Is it, what's the approach this time?
Yeah, the approach is I'm starting with a product that people actually want. So remember that 3-year journey? Yeah, remember that 3-year journey that it took for us to get the first $10? Like that did not happen. So I think like success is not repeatable, right? It's not like, Simon, you had one success, so you're guaranteed to have another success. Like that is untrue. Because you just never know what the market and timing is going to be, like how the market's going to react. But it does give you the insight to like not do things that didn't serve you. So do not build a product that you don't have customers for. That's what I did in my first company. But eWebinar is actually solving a problem that I personally lived with for 5 years in Spacio. I was the person, having run a super small team, like you can imagine, I was the person doing all the demos, all the onboardings, all the feature releases, like every single webinar that I did, like that we had to do, I did. And it was still never enough because you have new people coming in every day and people are in different time zones and they don't make your webinar. And we have like a replay graveyard in our inbox, like everybody does, and nobody watches them. So I had always envisioned this perfect product that would do my job for me. Well, I would go and have fun because don't forget, I was also traveling, like doing these things in like opposite time zones. So I had thought about this business day in and day out because it needed to exist. And things like it like do exist, but it's the difference between like a GeoCities website and like a Wix website. Like it's like stuff exists, but it's just not very good. And so eWebinar is actually a product like of my imagination. I thought about it so much that I didn't need to do any customer research. I didn't talk to anybody. Like I knew my peers struggle with it and I knew I struggle with it. So we just went out, designed it, built it and rolled it out.
Yeah, that's cool. And that's something I can actually very much relate to. I'm cognizant of time here, Melissa, but if there are business owners out there with traditional businesses who have thought about, building a SaaS product to solve their own problem, I mean, is there one piece of advice you'd give people thinking about going into SaaS for the first time?
Wow. Other than don't.
And take a minute while you're thinking about that, and Can I ask, are you happy for people to reach out and connect with you? Because if they have questions or they'd like to talk to you about a webinar or anything like that.
Yeah, absolutely. They can always find me on LinkedIn. It's Melissa Kwan, Kwan, and eWebinar is spelled exactly as it sounds, ewebinar.com. Definitely go and
Cool.
check it out. But yeah, any business owner that's thinking of stepping into SaaS, like my biggest piece of advice is think long and hard about whether this is a problem you're so passionate about solving that you can no longer accept the world without it. Because if you don't love it that much, you're not going to be able to not have a paycheck and need to pay other people for 2 to 3 years of your life, because that is what it's going to take. There is nobody, like, if you have not started a tech company before, you will not understand how difficult it is. And the difficulty is not in building the product. If you knew exactly what you were building, like, then you can go and build it. It's like, here's a table. I want to build this table, and then you're going to buy this table. Unfortunately, tech is like a Rubik's Cube. It's very, very dynamic. And also, not all code is written equally. Know that. So there is no real spec. It's like how good your product is completely left up to the imagination of your CTO. And it is extremely difficult to find a CTO that's very good. Like the top 1% is doing something for themselves or, for an experienced SaaS founder. So that's the advice I would give is just know that it's going to take 2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
And think really hard about how passionate you are to solve this problem.
Wow, really great advice. Melissa, thank you. Thank you so much for coming on the show. I'm really grateful. You've shared your story, the ins and outs, the ups and downs. I know that there'll be people listening to this who will just get so much value from it. So look, really appreciate you taking the time and coming on the show.
Well, thanks so much for having me. This was fun.